Mistress Vania Changes Jobs, Episode 7. "If you drive a Lexus, you're somebody," said Brad Hooper to an assembled group of well-dressed, well-fed people. Everybody notices a Lexus. Amanda considered the story a puff piece and a sellout. She walked around the car dealership showroom, snapping photographs of people eating canapés and sipping budget sparkling wine. Horace had been very clear. She was to cover the opening of the Hapten-Shufti's new Lexus dealership. The owner of the dealership, Brad Hooper, had signed up for 3 months of advertising. Therefore, on that basis, as Horace had explained, Mr. Hooper expected value for money. Brad Hooper prided himself on being a super salesman. He was certainly good at selling himself. His tailored Italian suit and extravagant Swiss watch shouted money and success. Amanda had to admit, begrudgingly, that he was charming in an annoying sort of way. She'd been told by a number of different people that he had married 4 times, and further informed that, despite being a multiple divorcee, he still got on well with all his previous wives. He had achieved the seemingly impossible goal of an amicable divorce. Not once, but 3 times. Amanda thought that the more generous the settlement, the more amicable it may be, but there was no guarantee of this. Divorces typically were less than amicable. Brad had money. It came to him in the form of property investments, car dealerships, and a fleet of recreational deep-sea fishing boats. A celebrity jockey, Nick Dunn, had arrived to be the first person to purchase a new Lexus from the dealership. His vehicle was a very handsome, very large Lexus LS. In gunmetal grey, it was a nondescript vehicle in Amanda's opinion, yet the jockey was a local identity who was much admired for having won a significant horse race earlier that year. Amanda noted that it was always the small men who chose the largest cars. Figuring this was the closest thing she would get to a story, she attempted to photograph him in his new car. From most angles, all she could see was the top of his head. In the end, out of desperation, Amanda suggested that he stand in the back seat and put his body through the open sunroof. The increased elevation pleased the celebrity jockey. He looked a bit like a tank commander from the Second World War, putting his head out of a turret. The only thing left was to get some quotes from Brad. "This will put Hapten-Shufti on the map," said Brad, as Amanda put her phone into audio recording mode. "Before, if you wanted a prestige car, you needed to go down south. Now will be them who are coming to Hapten-Shufti. This is my 3rd dealership in 4 years, but I never stop getting excited about opening a new one. Being in the racing world, Nick here knows a thing or two about taste and style. That's why he chose a Lexus LS. Isn't that right, Nick?" "Sure is," agreed the jockey. Amanda had enough material to write her story, although in her opinion it was little more than an infomercial. Maybe she could blame the Internet for the decline in the quality of print media, or the poor level of literacy that was eroding the readership of her longer, more thoughtful articles. Regardless, she could always blame Horace for sending her to Hapten-Shufti. It was a pointless town, filled with pointless people leading pointless lives. She could not imagine anything interesting ever happening in Hapten-Shufti. To find out precisely why nothing was happening in Hapten-Shufti, Amanda arrived at the police station. For a town that was not particularly large, and appeared to have no crime at all, the station was quite large and well staffed. Politicians would argue that the substantial allocation of resources was precisely the reason why there was no crime. Horace had arranged for Amanda to interview a detective, Sergeant Rake, about law and order in Hapten-Shufti. This was sounding very boring until Horace mentioned that Rake was a bit of a lad and will probably ask you out on a date. He's not really your type, but either way, you'd be advised to say no. At that point, Amanda's opinion of the assignment changed from being bored to being annoyed. After presenting her credentials at the front desk, Amanda was shown by a constable to Rake's office. She figured that Rake looked strong, not like a bodybuilder, more like a rower. He was in his late 30s and balding, with very short cropped hair around the sides. Rake rose from his chair and approached her with his hand outstretched. He gave a firm handshake, but did not smile. Amanda noted that he was wearing the cheapest brown suit she had ever seen. The fibres might have been sourced from recycled plastic. It had a stiff, shiny quality that was quite disgusting. Finally, seated behind his desk once more, Rake smiled to reveal orthodontic clear aligners. It took Amanda by surprise simply because it was so unexpected. "Usually, in these situations," said Rake, "I would say, I'm very busy with an important case and I'd prefer to keep this interview to 15 minutes. "Usually?" said Amanda. "Yes," said Rake. "But as of the present moment I have no outstanding urgent cases at all." "That would have been a pretty unusual situation for a police detective," said Amanda. Yes," said Rake, without elaborating. "Could you guess as to why this is the case?" asked Amanda. "Potentially. Being a police officer, you may have a theory about why Hapten-Shufti is different, why it has so little crime." "I could say it was our program of working with the community," said Rake. "Or our working to provide services to Hapten-Shufti's youth." "Is it?" asked Amanda. "No," said Rake, with a sigh. "The community is tireless in its ability to ignore all our programs, even the information evenings with cheese and crackers and light refreshments. And as for the youth, they spend just about all of their time on the Internet. I expect they're pirating movies and stealing credit card numbers, but that's outside my jurisdiction." "The Internet has a lot to answer for," agreed Amanda, making sure her voice recorder was working. "So you don't have any outstanding crimes? Unsolved murders?" "Hapten-Shufti residents don't murder one another," said Rake, looking bored as he took a packet of mints from his pocket and offered one to Amanda. "They don't even murder incomers or visitors. There's no reason to visit Hapten-Shufti unless you live here." "So let me get this straight," said Amanda incredulously. "In all the time you've been a police officer, no one has ever been murdered?" "That's correct," said Rake, eating 2 mints at once, "although I should probably put a caveat on that last statement. There have been Hapten-Shufti murders, but they've gone down south to do the murdering. I say it's a change in environment. The intense boredom of Hapten-Shufti counteracts people's latent homicidal tendencies. As soon as they go down south, these tendencies rise to the surface and present as actual crimes." "Fascinating," said Amanda, while looking bored rigid. "How about drugs?" "Our only derelict drunk died of old age last year," said Rake. "Apparently, at the funeral, it came out that he was older than we expected, around 83. He lived in a potting shed, made up with a bed and a little wooden stove for the winter months." "So even your homeless people have houses, after a fashion," said Amanda. "Well, they're not sleeping rough directly on the street," said Rake. "But you can't seriously call a potting shed a house, can you?" "I suppose not," said Amanda, wondering if she could fill an entire 15 minutes with these tepid answers to her hard-hitting questions. Amanda noticed that Rake was making strange eye movements. He seemed to be hinting that she should look in a particular direction. That direction was the left-hand side of his desk. There was nothing there except papers, a pen, and the packet of mints. "Sure you wouldn't like a mint?" said Rake, with his clear aligner smile. Quickly, Rake took another 2 mints and crammed them into his mouth, with the already existing mint that had not yet dissolved. Amanda read the brand on the packet. "Pheromone mints. Last longer, taste stronger." "I'm not familiar with that brand," said Amanda casually. "I'd be careful. Some of these sweets have a laxative effect." "Oh, don't worry," said Rake. "I get the runs, but never from mints." Amanda made a mental note that the interview had hit rock bottom and was now at risk of going subterranean. "They're only available on the Internet," said Rake, picking up the mints and putting them back into his pocket. "The Internet has a lot to answer for," said Amanda again. "Being a detective, I already know a lot about you," said Rake. "Because you looked me up on the Internet?" asked Amanda. "No," said Rake. "By observation and detection. For instance, you're single, a career journalist, just lost your job. That's why you're here." "How do you know I am single?" asked Amanda, slightly annoyed at the presumption of the statement. "A couple of reasons," said Rake. "Times are tough for journalists at the moment. A lot of newspapers are shutting down. No one comes to Hapten-Shufti, no one like you. You came because you needed the money. you were in a relationship, you'd be a bit of time to find another job down south. Not that there are many journalism jobs at the moment, but you'd have tried. In a relationship, there's always another income apart from your own." There may have been logic in what he was saying, but Amanda still thought it was too presumptuous to make any of these assumptions. "Anything else?" asked Amanda. "Yes," said Rake. "Female newshound reporters like you, they almost always encourage the affections of other women. It comes with the territory. Not that you're a hairy masculine type in bench trousers and short back and sides, no. You're more a lipstick lesbian, I'd have to say. I find you very attractive. Your orientation is an added dynamic that builds the excitement." Amanda struggled to think of something to say. Rake's comments were so contemptible that nothing coherent came to mind. It was the kind of situation where all the comeback lines come to you hours after the opportunity is lost. Rake pulled up his trousers in a very peculiar way. They rode up past his navel and looked very uncomfortable. "I know you find other women attractive," said Rake, sitting on the edge of his desk, "but I also know that you desire something else, the other, that thing that is missing, that thing which no woman can give you." "I think you have eaten too many of your mints," said Amanda. Rake's behaviour was odd, but Amanda had dealt with a lot of oddballs. On her scale, Rake was rating as an amateur in both sleaziness and oddity. "I'd just like to say," added Rake in a lower tone, "everything you see is mine." "Pardon?" asked Amanda, this last statement particularly obscure to her. "I don't pad out my credentials," said Rake cryptically. "You've lost me," said Amanda. "Sometimes," said Rake, searching for words, "a man might be packing a third sock to make him appear to be more than he really is." Rake made more eye movements, this time in a downward direction. "As I said," he continued, "everything you see is my own." "Well, that's reassuring to know," said Amanda. "It will be a real worry if you are stuffing your underpants with someone else's socks and not your own." Amanda stood outside the police station shouting into her phone. "Horace," she said, clenching her fist, "I've just about had enough of these Hapten-Shufti people. That detective Rake is a head case, and he thinks I'm a lesbian." "I don't think you're a lesbian," said Horace, slightly confused. "I'm not," said Amanda. "Not that it's any business of his if I am or I'm not. But I shouldn't have to explain myself either way. He's so sure of himself, that's what annoyed me most." "He's a butthead," agreed Horace. "But I was hoping he was a good source of stories for you. Proper stories that you might be more to your taste than the dog show and the car dealership thing." "Hapten-Shufti could be seething with crime and overflowing with lesbians," said Amanda, calming down a little. "I have serious doubts that he would be able to correctly identify either. I should call Rachel and every other lesbian I know. They come down and kick his ass. I'd gladly join in and help them. I'm not sure why there isn't a long queue of people lining up for that purpose." "I didn't know Rachel was a lesbian," said Horace. "Shows how much I know. I thought she was going out with Ivan." "Ivan's gay too," said Amanda, exasperated. "He's dating that guy that he met at the car wash." "Yes," said Horace, never really getting a proper handle on the conversation. "Always the car wash. All that water and soap suds. It's a natural place to find love. That aside, I hope they're all very happy in their respective relationships, but you can't collect up a gay posse of work colleagues and beat up police detectives." "Rake deserves it," said Amanda. "I don't doubt it," said Horace. "He eats those mints he buys on the internet." "I need a story by the end of the week, or I'm out of here," said Amanda firmly. "I'd rather pack shelves in the supermarket than be a journalist in Hapten-Shufti."